I would clearly state that it takes us all more than a while to come into the correct understanding of things. And I think that those people that rush themselves to believe that their understanding is, in fact, the primal understanding are in a position of ill faith, amongst other things. However, I do state that, what I am going to delve into is not an easy subject, and I think that we have to really understand that the way the planet is designed in a way that people aren't seeking, or aspects of the planet is designed in a way that people aren't seeking knowledge for the sake of knowledge and appreciation of the whole, but more so people seek knowledge for the ability or the concept of manipulating others and having control over other people. Which again, I think that for some people, yes, of course, it might be a interesting reason to seek knowledge. However, I always say that don't seek for power. Or at least I'll just do one that everybody already knows, which is with great power comes great responsibility. So don't always rush to be in a seat of power, because when you sit in that seat of power, or when you rush to be in that seat of power, there comes along with it a set of things that you have to take into consideration, and that you have to actually, that you have to actually pay attention to and be aware of, and obviously maneuver in a reasonable fashion that benefits whatever it is that gives you that specified power, or whether you take it. I don't know. Power is not really the topic of today. What I think is important though is to understand that, number one, Doppler, right? The Doppler effect is key and fundamental in everything. Especially, I think that as we understand time as a frequency, as we understand time as a frequency or as a methodology that is a stream, right? So we tend to see time as a stream. If you do that, then you overlay the Doppler effect, you start to begin to understand some of the other aspects associated with it. But I think a lot of people really forget that it encompasses a lot more than just objects and things and all that. There's a bunch of shit associated with it. But yeah, so what would we like to talk about today? Today's discussion is going to be about discovery, and it's going to be notions associated with the world, and also associated with the way that the world is at the moment, and also we're going to attempt to fill in aspects of gaps that are missing in the consciousness of those living in this world today, right? So I think without further ado, it's probably important to start off by explaining the movement of people, right? So, and I'm not undermining any educational institution or establishment. This is just my basic understanding, without the necessary background and with the information that I've been given in relation to how or what's available and what's known to mankind today. But I'm not undermining the academic establishments that have put in a lot of great work to get to the way things are today. But again, I think that in the last less than 5 to 10 years, in the last 15 years, right? In the last 10 years, anything below that is quite difficult, because information has been highly siloed, and research has been obviously governed by these academic institutions, which limit people's ability to express, interpret, and give accurate understanding of knowledge, which is vital, right? Because that's how it works. That's how it's ultimately determined. We use that as a methodology for conceptualizing and understanding the world and reality as the way that it is, right? So that's the first thing. So because obviously it is difficult to get information out, right? Information was difficult to distribute, and it was highly controlled and highly regulated. But as of late, it's been more quick moving and quicker updates to information, which allows us to form better interpretations and better understanding of things. without having to ultimately always, you know, wait for academic information to become widespread and understood by the masses. Not to say that academic information is slow in its publications, but it also is just the fact that that information being understood and being distributed is not as fast as we would all like or enjoy it to be. Right? So let's start by discussing what I understand is the methodology of movement within a specific portion of the ancient world. Okay, so here what we're just gonna do, we're just gonna think about, or at least try to understand the notion, right? So here we have Mecca over here, right? And then conceptually there's probably like this land bridge here that could be used, right? So if you just, because a lot of people seem to think that, you know, people go from here to here to this direction here, but then if you just stop and imagine, right? One, there's a shit ton of content here that isn't generally understood. And you know, if you imagine people walking from this direction, you know, or from these regions here, or even possibly from some of these regions here as well, Mali, etc., you find that it is logical, right, that people would then enter past this land bridge here, and there could also have been a land bridge somewhere near here or some mechanism of navigating this. But you have here the Holy Land, here the most holiest of places known to the connected world or the united world. So we have Israel there, which is somewhat, you know, holy to a degree, and then we have Mecca said to be around this region here, right? So when you begin to first, like, you know, when you understand that as people made their journey from here, or from environments around here, right, around this region here, right, from which people made their journeys from these regions here, we would have to transition through this particular section. And you know, if you know the story of how Mecca came to be, you'd know that the Kaaba, right, which is the key thing here, was actually a point in time where they had like a lot of different idols there, and the manifestation of those idols are basically human consciousness utilizing that to remember and pass on lessons as taught in this particular region here, right? So here you would have found interesting architecture to guide individuals or to give them a path forward, and here you would have found the greatest pieces of knowledge that would have enabled you to understand how to navigate the rest of this plane here, right? So if you can see that, you can see that obviously, like, you know, the way that people would walk, and they'll get that teaching from, okay, so here, that's probably why there ended up being so many idols, because there were different notions around how to move through these other regions of the world, right? So you're probably better off to getting to thinking through Istanbul, Bulgaria, and Greece, and all those particular sections there. That's probably why their thing is so rich. Is this? Fuck is it spelled like that, bro? Dang. Well, it is Istanbul there. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I know. You see mosques and stuff. So these were actually centers of initiation, or at least you probably go through the greatest initiation within the Egypt area, and then once you go through, you can then travel through different areas. You can also see that's probably why there were so many gods between this environment, between in India and the like, because these are memories, these are teachings that they were taught, you know, in this particular region here, right? And then these teachings and thoughts were transitioned or were moved throughout to these particular lands here. And here you can see that people definitely suffered a greater sense of aspectual forgetfulness. But then when you arrive to these areas here, it became more stable and it became more understood, because it took time for people to go from here to say, okay, people are losing meaning, and then move that information towards to here, right? So a lot of people will say Iraq is the birthplace of modern civilization. Trust me, they haven't even begun to scratch the surface yet in relation to that. It's just that's where it seems that the most aspectual concepts of knowledge are centered around. But this is where the importance of remembering came into play, of actually knowing and understanding. And so you can see it sort of moves, and then as you come to this region here, it sort of settles down, and it's like it's not really many gods, it's just few gods, and more focus on the acceptable context. So when moving through this environment, it's actually quite difficult and strenuous, because there's so many things that can inhibit you, because people don't have the same level of understanding relating things. So spiritually moving through there is actually not an easy feat in my viewpoint. That's at least my understanding. Like, you find tons of stuff, but people obviously understood that they had the confidence in the knowledge which inhibited that thought process and within the mind that actually allowed them to be able to actually be confident in directing their own knowledge. And you can also see why people look at cows and stuff, because it's like, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, feel free, but it's like it's what actually is some of the main concepts of the teachings that were taught, and that was one of the main, would have been one of the main things taught around this region here. And that would have been a vital, important thing for everyone to conceptualize and to understand in order to be in a survival, or to be able to sustain and be, how can I say, it was important for them to be able to, to nurture and live, etc., and farming and all that type of stuff. So that's probably why that's all relevant here, because we understood that as a mechanism to say, as a source of value, right? And then as you move towards here, it comes back to the person, to the center point, to conceptual, actual consciousness, right? So if you look around this side here, you find that it's very spiritual in one sense or another, at least this side here. And then when you go to the Philippines, it's not really as much of a thing, at least that's what I imagine. And also in some of these places here where it's still kind of spiritual, but there's a differential concept towards it. And then because obviously it's more distance, right? So traveling between these environments was something not simply, it wasn't an easy feat in my viewpoint. And then, and then as you come to these regions here, you find that it's very differentiated. It's more focused on the mind. But there's other aspects that I'm not going to get into right now. But let's just focus on this section here. And sort of coming through this particular environment here. And that's pretty much it, really. I don't know what Singapore's saying, those other places, but they seem reachable. All the way here, there would have been so many teachings around here, right? Even like how to sail, how to build boats, and all that type of stuff. So you go through the initiation process here, and anyone could as they came through, and then here you can, depending on probably where you're going, you get directed to different concepts, but they'll try to give you the notion of like the importance and the vitalness of maintaining the core truth, rather than people obviously adjusting things a little bit, as you can see within the text. And then here, that was the point of Mecca, and that was probably the idea behind Mecca. But ideally, people were probably were able to get across to the Red Sea here, likely, and they'll probably navigate through this particular section for those that didn't want to have to go through these other bits here. So while this was important, or maybe probably like when this became more problematic, and so because Egypt fell, right? Let's not forget that. So, and then it's difficult to ascertain at what point it did, but yeah, so the we'll probably able to get through to this particular section here. Again, that's how that pretty much worked in my particular viewpoint. And you'd also see that a lot of people, there'll be these places will become like secret places to a degree. So like, you probably find like this here to be somewhat different to what most people would ultimately think about. But it be what it be. But I hope that makes sense though. This land bridge here would be. What country is this, bro? French speaking, Arabic speaking country of dry shorelands, volcanic formation and Gulf. And beaches is home to one of the Soviets put it the road and the wall of the Blue Lane Lake over there. Cool. The nomadic people have. Okay, yeah, no, it's interesting. But yeah, this is what you need to understand. And so it pretty much is interesting to conceptualize regarding how or the methodologies of how consciousness is developed, and to also understand what it is, this thing that a lot of people are always referencing in relation to religious texts and other things, and its vitalness and importance in navigating the world. Okay, so let's take a minor minute to just try to understand, the notion here regarding what we're looking at here, right? So this is what I believe to be a Neanderthal skull, and if my sources are correct, right, these bad boys lived for a very, very long time, right? And apparently this is evidence, if my source is correct, based on their eyebrows. But not only their eyebrows, also look at how crazy their eyes were, right? And also look, just look at this bad boy, right? Now we are led to believe that these people had to be somewhat stupid based on, it's research. So, no, we're led to believe that obviously these people were somewhat dumb to a degree, like they weren't really the most smartest individuals on the planet. However, they were hunter-gatherers, etc., and all that type of stuff, which is what we're given as an understanding of, who they were. But sometimes we fail to, and we can't really of who they were, right? But as you can see here, we can assume, if my source is correct, they live incredibly long lifespans, and they were pretty insanely interesting beings in one sense or another. Let's put it that way, right? So even like looking at the way their eyes are, so they could probably had greater vision and a bunch of other things, including also the way that their teeth are, considering how old the skull may be, right? But again, at the same time, I then put before you something as a conceptual thing to contemplate, right? We understand that these octopuses, right, though they look whatever like they look not so. Well, I don't know. We can't really if we compare them to our way of being. We'd obviously say that we have a higher consciousness than them, and we are someone probably consider ourselves more smarter than them. simply because of the way that we observe them and our understanding of them. We don't see them as creatures that are able to, be or do whatever it is that we believe is of value in relation to what we consider as requirements for being beings on this planet, or as good attributes for being beings on this planet. So here again we have that Neanderthal, and as you can see here, right, just after we look at the octopuses, which are not stupid creatures, right, if you look at a Neanderthal skull, right, it's actually kind of crazy. Like, it's actually insane. And if you look at the teeth as well, just in general, I think teeth-wise is probably okay, but this human here is probably way... Right, it's weird how human beings, like us, right, like our teeth are not, I guess if you look after them, but I don't know. But anyway, so this here you can clearly see, obviously, the nose as well. The atmosphere would have been a bit different. You can clearly see the architecture here of the Neanderthal in terms of brain size, right? This is insanely sized cranium here. So its way of thinking would have been very drastically different to what we consider, personally, from my opinion. Because if you see how smart an octopus is, right, and you compare that to this particular individual, like, if you don't take these things there for granted, bro, peeps, these things are super smart, like super smart in relation to issues that they are adapted to dealing with, right? So what they are accustomed to. But yeah, there's smart things. Don't underestimate them, in my viewpoint. And whether or not we can even begin to scratch the surface relating to how these advances being done, and we look also at the Neanderthal and try to understand how smart it can be compared to us beings living in this day and age, right? And I think when you begin to factor that in, that's when you really begin to understand how our ancient past could have been so different to what we understand it to have been. And when you look also at the way that we have people today that live in different environments, maybe like for example, right, you still have people that live like in jungles, etc., that are still living somewhat rurally, like in a rural sense, or in a sense that we perceive as primitive. I forget the notion to describe some of these people, but they're definitely there. We have tribes of people in this world that have, technically speaking, have never made contact with people, besides the contact that they made to make that definition of whatever that aspect of contractual, for us to have that information. So let's not forget that fact. So sometimes when we look at these Neanderthals, the ones that we're looking at might be drastically different to the ones on the globe or on the overall planet, right? So when you understand that, you then begin to break apart and start beginning to understand everything as it should be understood, from my viewpoint, right? Because like I keep saying, these people at different levels of what we can consider advanced, right? Based on different regional and environmental concepts. So that's one thing to take into consideration. But what I always say is, don't underestimate these people, right? Look at that, the brow, bruh, that brow. The brow, yeah. So that's that, right? So I always say, always keep an open mind, but that's what's important here. I try to bring back the relevance of the octopus and the relevance of the skull's size. So the brain size here is drastically relevant to my viewpoint in the overall understanding of humanity as a whole. With all that being said, I think that what is vital for everyone just to be in the correct understanding of things is for me to leave this particular session and discussion or expression at this particular point of reference, which I think is vital, because it what underpins most, if not everything, in relation to what it is that I've tried to make reference to. And when you just look at this just as a small minor component of a wider whole or a wider concept of things occurring in this world, I think that you'd be quite amazed at the understanding that you arrived to, and what was ultimately important, and what could have been in that region of time, and what people could have thought of as a methodology to say, this is how we're going to leave the world, and this is what we're going to do, etc., in relation to the coming age of the whatever concept of time ending, etc. Or who knows what they knew, man? Who knows? But yeah, that's pretty much it, and I'd like to leave this here, and I hope I've given you enough food for thought in relation to how amazing this world can or may be.